Going to start recording. I'm going to share my screen. And if anybody can drop in the chat, let me know really quickly if you can see my screen. That would be awesome. I definitely don't want to go through and not have you be able to see my screen. So if somebody wants to just pop in there and say, yes, you can see it, that would be great. Yes, thank you so much. Okay, well, welcome everybody to Learning Revolution. My session today is on digital tools to foster connectedness in remote learning. And as I said, this is being recorded and all of your audio and video are turned off. And so please don't turn the video on or audio because it would interrupt the other people who are participating and also presenters. So there's that. But definitely, I encourage you to click on the chat and share where you're from, what your role is in education, what you teach, maybe ideas that you're looking for, your Twitter handle, any of those things will be great to share in the chat as well. And then ask questions. And as I said, I will stop throughout and check the chat. And if somebody asks a question and you know the answer, by all means, go ahead and share. And then I'll save time at the end as well to see if there are any additional questions. So today I'll be sharing a couple of different tools, but the main one that I'll be sharing is Buncee. And if you've not heard of it, or if you've heard of it and you've kind of been curious to learn about it, then I hope that during this time, maybe you might even start create an account and get started with it right away, because it really does offer a lot of opportunities for our students, for ourselves, and even for our families to create, to connect, to design amazing presentations, lots of different things that you can use it for. And it is one tool that I have been recommending to teachers in my school district and also educators from around the world that have been asking for ideas during this time of remote learning. And so I'll be sharing Buncee and then some other tools that work with it that you may already be using and didn't realize that they kind of connect and work together. So the idea behind this is to show you that you don't need to do all the things. I know when remote learning started and our schools closed, even though initially we were probably hoping, well, definitely hoping, and thinking maybe only temporary closures, and then of course move to the full academic year, finding the right tools. There were so many resources being shared that even for somebody who has been teaching online or has been using technology, it was overwhelming to kind of think like, how am I going to do what I was doing in my classroom in this virtual space when there are so many things that we didn't know, like student access, whether they would have enough support at home, if they were working in a space with a lot of other siblings and parents working at home, and then being able to connect with them. And so finding one or two tools that enable us to kind of facilitate a lot of learning opportunities with our students makes a difference. And so I started to focus on what are the things that we want to do the most in our classroom? Do we want to have conversations? Do we want to engage our students with ways to learn that are different, that are authentic and meaningful for them? And if so, like, what are the tools that we can use for that? And for me, I've been using Buncee for about 5 years now. And for many purposes, initially it was just for presentations for my students to create. But then over the years, seeing their ideas and also just kind of coming up with my own, it has become my go-to tool for so many reasons. So I'll be sharing Buncee with you and a little bit just about me. My name is Rachelle Dene Poth. I am a Spanish and STEAM teacher at Riverview High School, which is outside of Pittsburgh. And I've been teaching there for a while. I've also taught French. And I also work as a consultant, and I have written a couple of books in the past year, which I was very excited about because I got to share a lot of the experiences of my students, what we did in my classroom, and even share some of their stories in some of the books. So I love learning, I love sharing, and if I can, explore some different digital tools or try some ideas and share quick takeaways or ways for teachers to get started without having to worry about learning everything or there being a big learning curve, then that's what my goals are. That's what I enjoy doing the most. So as we work through this, the presentation that I'm sharing with you has been created with Buncee. And so everything that you see, even just in this one slide, is in Buncee itself, except for my profile picture and the image I have of the books, but everything else is part of the library of things that you can find within Buncee. So different font styles, animations, stickers, you name it. It is like a very multi-purpose, one-stop shop. Now, when I started to think about what did I want to do in my classroom, how could I kind of move everything from what we were doing in class in that 42-minute period of time into this virtual space where I may not have all of my students joining in, or I might not be able to reach all of my students, there were a lot of challenges. And these are still some challenges that I continue to work through, even though now we've been almost 3 months at this point working through remote learning with my students and in our schools. So these are challenges that I know that I had initially and that many other educators were sharing that they had as well. Number one, like, how do I teach Spanish and a STEAM course remotely? Even though I've used technology and we've all been in webinars and done things online and used technology in our personal lives and professional lives, it did not prepare me to teach a high school course online. And so I had a hard time wrapping my head around, how do I do this? And I tried to put everything into that virtual space that I was doing in my classroom. And so that was my first challenge. Then, of course, like I mentioned, sorting through all of the options that are out there, because there are so many, which is wonderful, but it doesn't help if you really just want to get started quickly and have something that enables you to do a lot of different things that you would do in your classroom. Finding a way to share resources. So for my students, the difference between being in the classroom and I could move around in 42 minutes and I could see what they were working on, we could have conversations, we could do an activity, it might be something without technology or with technology, and they could connect together. So finding a way to kind of do all of that same thing, all of those same things in this virtual space was a challenge. Supporting students and families. So again, not necessarily knowing all that I needed to in terms of what access they had, what kind of support that they had, and how I could connect with the families and the students. And then overall, as always, creating these authentic learning opportunities. And so those were my top 5, although there were way more than 5, but those are the kinds of things that I started to notice that other teachers were looking for as well, and that they were having challenges with. And so that's why I started to share Buncee, because you really can do a lot of things with it. And once I started to share by doing some webinars for teachers in my school district, because we don't have a tech coach, the elementary teachers especially were looking for ways that they could do things like read aloud and share messages and greet students and give lessons and all of that in one space, but not knowing whether their first or second grade students or even kindergarten students would be able to access whatever they were creating. And so helping them through that and seeing what they created has been really awesome. So Buncee, when all of this started, put together this remote learning kit. And I will, when I take a break in between, I will drop some links into the chat, or if you Google it, you'll find it. But they initially put together a kit so teachers and schools that were undergoing those school closures could fill out a form to get access to like a classroom account, which whenever you can sign up for free and there are limits, but when this happened, teachers could get their own classroom account where they could have, and I will show you a teacher dashboard, and students could enroll and join the class. They could communicate within that dashboard and within that platform. And so it made it easier. Now on the screen, you may recognize some of the other tools that you might be using either in your own classroom or on at your school. For my school, we use Microsoft and we have Microsoft Teams, but it's not something that all teachers were already using. And so some have gone and started to use Microsoft Teams with their classes. And I know for next year, that will be something that we will all work on, especially since we're not sure what will happen with school in the fall when the new school year starts. Google Classroom. So if you have Microsoft, Google Classroom, maybe if you're using Wakelet or Flipgrid, and even using a tool like Nearpod, having some of these, it's nice that you can kind of interact with them and that you can share a lesson or you can provide a link. And it's amazing how technology kind of just facilitates those connections and collaborations. Also, if you notice this symbol here, the immersive reader, for anybody that is working with students who are language learners and building language skills, for me as a Spanish teacher, helping my students to just build confidence when they're speaking, accessing the immersive reader, which you are probably seeing is being added into a lot of the other platforms and digital tools that are out there. And so in terms of giving information to our parents, the students' parents and our families and their families, having them be able to access the information and not worry about if they're losing resources or losing out on opportunities because of the language itself. And so Buncee does offer the immersive reader, and many of these other tools, like I said, work with Buncee. So you might be wondering, what is Buncee? I did say it is a one-stop shop, and it's a multimedia creation tool that really does enable you or anyone, and it's not specific to education. I know a lot of times I'll get a question from people at conferences that say, well, is it just for elementary, or is it just for this content area? And I always say no, because I have seen grades K through 12, higher education. I've used it personally to make greeting cards, presentations like this one, for social media, for book studies, signs for my classroom. And I've also had students whose younger siblings have seen them creating with it, and they made their own Buncees. And even some students whose parents used Buncee to create a presentation for work, which when I heard that, I was really interested, because I thought, always you're hearing Google presentations or PowerPoints, and the parents had seen this and decided, why not try it out? And it was something that was so different and so visually engaging that I thought it was a great idea that they did that. Plus, students see that what they're learning and creating with goes beyond just that one class or their school experience. It's something that they can apply later on. And so on this image, you can see a couple of the different features. Buncee does have a lot of different choices in terms of the graphics and things that you can add in. And more recently, you will see if you log in, they have added essential workers, things related to the coronavirus, Mother's Day, different holidays and celebrations, and things that are happening like in current events as well. So they're constantly adding new things to their library, which makes it nice as well if you are having students create, and we're talking about like real world learning. I know in my classes we do project-based learning, and so two of my students in my Spanish 4 class focused this time on studying the Spanish flu and the coronavirus, and so that was their project-based learning. And another student did Spanish poverty, or poverty in Spain, I should say, and looking at the sustainable development goals. And they used Buncee to put all of their information together, recorded themselves with a video, and had some audio and links into it. So it really was an easy way for them to share their information and to use all of the features that are in it to really make it engaging for everybody that was listening to the presentation. Now on this screen, there are a lot of things going on, but what I can say about it is if you are looking for a tool that enables you to give, say, your classes activities for every day of the week, if you are an administrator or you have a different role in education and you're sending out newsletters or announcements of any sort, or you want to send helpful links, media specialists often have links for students to do research. You could have just one slide that could be just like this, where you have some different stickers, which are just the plain images. You have the animations, which you see a bunch of them moving on the screen, but there are other things that you can add in as well. For assessments, if you have the classroom account as a teacher, in your Buncees, you can add in free response or open response questions, as well as multiple choice. So as students work through a Buncee presentation or a lesson that you've created, they can read the content, they could watch any videos that you embedded, like the ones that are here. They could put a response in, answer those questions, and they could even have the option to record something themselves and then submit a Buncee back to you. So you could use this as your one space where you hyperlink different websites, add in your own video that you recorded, or even just record yourself giving instructions to your students. And for me, whenever the schools actually closed, one of the first things that I did is I created a Buncee, and it was just this one slide, and I linked the 3 most important things for my students, that if the only website, the only link that they bookmarked was this presentation, then they would be fine for that whole period of the time that we were closed and not in school. And all I did was I created a separate virtual learning overview. It was a Google presentation, and I basically went through what to expect if they join in our Zoom class meetings. And so if they missed it and they wanted to go back, they could go to this and click on it. I gave them their reminders, just a list. I have a Google form that I created where they would submit their assignments, because one thing that I noticed is there are so many emails, and for our students and ourselves to go from, I mean, not just taking one class online, but having their whole entire schedule, and then potentially getting emails from all of their teachers more than one time a day, every day. It was overwhelming. And I know for me, with the number of students and the classes that I teach, I wanted to have a more consistent way where if students submitted work and I needed to show what students had done during that period in terms of accountability, that I would have an easy way to access all of that without having to go through the email, and the same for them. And so I made that Google form. I reminded them to join in the meetings, which were not mandatory, but I'm happy with the number of students that have continued to join in every single week. And then I also created a Padlet, which I'll tell you about if you've never used Padlet. It's great for storing a lot of resources. And now I could have used Buncee for all of this, but for the classes that I teach, since I teach 5 different courses, it was easier to kind of manage everything like this. So with all 5 of my classes, I shared this one Buncee, which is one slide. I just kind of put it into this whole presentation. And I did record a greeting to them. Now for you, if you're looking for something for every week, say on a Monday, to send something to your students or to parents and families, or for the school community, you could do the same thing, where if you did have something else, like maybe there was a website you wanted students to look at, maybe there was a document or a Google form or presentation that you had, you could link everything in this one and then provide directions by recording the video. And the video you can record up to 3 minutes. So it did kind of facilitate like this one centralized space that students could go to. Now, if I click on this Padlet, just to give you another idea, because these talking about like, how do you connect? Lots of different ways. So Buncee is the main one, but of course, using different tools to provide different opportunities is always good as well. So hopefully you can see the Padlet. And for me, like I said, I teach 5 different courses. And so it made sense for me to use Padlet to create a column for each of my courses, and then to just link whatever they needed. Now, a problem that I faced was that many of my students did not take home their textbook or their workbook. And so trying to figure out like, how do I provide materials for them? Not that I'm totally dependent on those books or workbooks, but finding something that was consistent and that all students would have access to. So I was able to find the workbook online and also to create different resources, but share it here. So if students only kept that one Buncee, they would be able to access everything that they needed, whether they're in Spanish 1, if they wanted to find the prior assignments, and then I can just update and move things around as needed. So that was the first thing that I did with Buncee. And I know there are some elementary teachers in my school district who did something quite similar and actually do that every single week, where they will create a presentation that has the 5 days of the week. Each day has a short video. It might be an overview, it might be an instruction, but it's usually a video that they created so that they can share their voice with their students. Something else that I did to check in with my students is I created this very short video to check in and send it to my classes to find out and to talk to them and say, like, if you have questions, if there's anything that I can help you with, this is how you can contact me. These are my hours I'm available, and things like that. But just did it in a different way so that they can hear me, that they can see. Now, if they wanted to, they could create their own Buncee and share it back with me. That is always an option. And it's good to be able to hear each other's voices and to make those connections. And it's also very quick to create with. But beyond that, what my goals were when I started to use, when I look at tools to use in my classroom, I always think about the purpose. Like, what is it that I want to do? Why? And it's not all about the technology, because paper products and projects and all of those things, those hands-on materials are great, but there are definitely times, at least in my classroom in teaching Spanish, where technology has made such a difference. And the biggest one has been being able to connect my students with other classrooms to learn more about the language that they're studying, which is Spanish, and to learn more about things that are going on in the world. And so for me, a big goal has been helping my students to learn on a global scale and to connect them so that it's not just me telling them, this is what it's like if you live in Argentina, or in Spain, this is what the family is like, or whatever their experiences are. For them to be able to create something and to share and exchange ideas and learn about somebody else, we were able to do that by using Buncee. And specifically with project-based learning, what we did was my students had connected with other students using Edmodo a couple of years ago. I created an announcement, and I asked if there were any teachers teaching in South America, Central America, or Spain that wanted to connect our classrooms. And I had a few responses, and based on the age and the time, like the schedules, we worked it out that the classroom in Argentina and in Spain were able to connect with my students. So for the first 2 months or so, all we did was exchange ideas through Edmodo. But for my students who were studying and working on their own topics for project-based learning, being able to ask questions directly to another student and understand from their perspective, like what it was like going to school, what activities families did, what students did in terms of school sports, if there were any, if they worked. And then my students created an About Me Buncee and put it on a Buncee board, which is what you see on the screen. It's similar to a bulletin board, or if you've used Padlet. So they created them, wrote them in Spanish, and shared them with those other schools. And an interesting thing happened. Those students who had never heard of Buncee saw what my students had created and decided they wanted to make their own. So those students created their own Buncees and shared them back with mine. And we were able to learn, oh, well, they don't have jobs like we do. Some of my students work at the local restaurants, and in Argentina, the students don't work. And they found out, like, they take mopeds to school. So it was really interesting to see how much more they learned by having this space where they could share their lives and interact with other students around the world. The power for technology for learning in that case was really amazing. And hearing that from my students say, like, there's no way that I could have learned this from any other experience, but being able to see what they wrote, to ask questions directly, made a huge difference for me. Another goal beyond teaching the language, of course, I want them to learn Spanish. I always tell them, you never know when you're going to need it, or if later on in life you need to have a language skill. For me, I took French in high school, and I'm teaching Spanish because I couldn't get a job when I first graduated college. And so I understand that not all of my students will go on to major in Spanish. However, I want them to do the best that they can. And sometimes it's uncomfortable, especially when learning a language. My students feel like they don't want to speak out in class. If I ask them a question, they're kind of hesitant to speak. They're afraid to make mistakes. And I tell them, I make mistakes all of the time. So I want them to feel comfortable building their language skills. And they've been able to do that with Buncee because what they do is they create the presentation, they put it into Spanish, and then with Immersive Reader being built in, they can actually listen to a native speaker saying the words, and they could repeat after them. Also, using the video, they can record themselves speaking, and if they don't like it, they can record it again. But I've noticed that they don't want to stand up in front of the classroom and speak, but they're totally fine with their Buncee presentation, with their video recording being played in the classroom, because they recorded it in a space where they were comfortable. They got to do it again in practice if they wanted to, and it kind of builds their skills and confidence in that regard. And so being able to express themselves, my students in my Spanish classes, also in my 8th grade STEAM course, we work through a lot of different topics. It's very important that they learn about digital citizenship and posting things responsibly and a lot of other skills that they need. So I do have them create an About Me. But the nice thing about this too is that if I were to share any of those that those students in 8th grade created around the world, because of Immersive Reader, anybody could translate them into their language and understand and learn, what's it like living in Pittsburgh, or what is it like to grow up in the United States, for example. So being able to create something that's meaningful to them and to express themselves, but also to connect with others and be able to share their experiences and look at the other presentations and learn about other people's lives and traditions, is also something important that I know that has been definitely increased by using tools like this. And then another goal was helping students to just understand this underlying, like, what's it like to live somewhere else, and exploring and being able to create a presentation, especially with project-based learning. And then recently, my students in my STEAM course have been doing Genius Hour activities and projects. And so they are looking at a lot of different topics, many of which are tied into what we're experiencing now. And so it has been a tremendous learning opportunity for me as well, just to see the information that they're finding and then how they're choosing to represent that information using Buncee, and then being able to share that with their classmates so that each student can go and look at it, be curious about it, ask questions, and then they're able to connect with one another, even though we're not in the classroom space, but being able to share it and connect and comment on it has made a difference. Because when I've checked in with students and I've asked them, you know, what's it like? Is there anything that I need to know? Is there anything that I can help you with? And a lot of times they are saying that they feel, you know, they're lonely, they're home by themselves, they miss being in class, they miss their friends and all of that. And so they have enjoyed joining into our Zoom meetings and creating and being able to like hear each other's voices when they're looking at each other's Buncee presentations or their Flipgrid videos, for example, which I'll share as well. A project idea that we are doing right now is students are talking about their family and sharing activities and family events. And so the best thing that I've taught myself over the years is if I want my students to do something, then I should be willing or prepared to do that myself. And I say that and laugh because for years, I couldn't understand why my students did not want to stand in front of the classroom and do a presentation to their peers. They would ask, can we just sit at our seats? Can we just write it down? Can we just stay after school and talk to you? And I said, well, no, like these are your classmates. You talk near them, around them, in front of them all the time. And it wasn't until I realized that that was something that I didn't even like to do in professional development sessions. And so I decided that I need to, if I'm asking them to create something, then I need to create something as well, because it keeps me learning and exploring. And then I can also connect with them and learn from them as well. So we're working on a family project, and some of the requirements were to just have fun creating, to include their family members and to describe, and no translators, of course. But I also wanted them to record a video of them just describing themselves. And so you can do a lot of different things with this. You can create a greeting, you could give the instructions with the video, or you can describe yourself or whatever it is that you're asking students to do. But it is fun to create and have that template to share with our students. And the biggest thing, as I look back over the last couple of months and the changes, where I went from trying to do everything I was doing in my physical classroom and focusing on like, I have to cover all of these things, then I made the shift to realizing, no, I need to focus on how do I connect my students and bring them together so they feel like at least part of this is still the normal classroom experience where they can interact and they can connect. And so I needed to really understand what experiences my students were having, if they had access to devices, if they were able to work in a space, what they were interested in. So having choices that they can explore through Buncee has made a difference. And as I mentioned, the immersive reader is definitely something that helps students in many ways. If you're building language skills, depending on what you teach, or for me teaching Spanish, having that immersive reader and being able to provide this for my students where they can listen to the words or they can understand parts of speech. And if I click on the immersive reader icon, if you've never seen this, any of those tools that are out there, if you see that immersive reader symbol and you click on it, it will open up a new window. Whatever text was on your screen, it will show up on the next window. And then you have a couple of options. One is you could simply hit the play button and it will go through and read it. You can choose the voice settings, so you can slow down or speed up the rate of speech. You can change the voice selection from female to male. And then over here on the right side, you have some other options. You can choose the text size. So I know for me personally, when I'm writing something, a lot of times I put the font in a larger size because it's easier for me to read. And then I have to always remember to shift it back to the standard size that most people tend to want. Or certain themes or colors, depending on what your choice preferences are. Grammar. If you're working with students who are developing language skills and maybe they're having a hard time identifying adjectives. So if I turn off the nouns and I decide I want to make the adjectives brown, then it'll show the adjectives in brown. So you can identify the parts of speech, and then syllables, it can break down by syllables. But then in terms of reading preferences, if you have students and you want them to just focus on single lines, or 3 lines or the whole, parts of text like that. Those are your options. And then of course you can translate the whole document into, I believe it's over 60 languages now. Even if you're teaching a course, I know in my school, they teach world cultures. And so students have to choose a different country. And in points, in a couple of years ago, students would create like food to bring in, and they do a big project. But it's interesting to be able to listen to what the language sounds like by a native speaker from those places. So if students did create in Buncee or any of these other tools where immersive reader is a component, then they could just listen to what it would sound like if somebody was speaking that language. There is a woman who uses Buncee, and she's an educator, she's in Canada. And I always talk about her story, is that in her school, there are around, I think she said 42 different languages spoken by students and their families. And in the school it's about 70% of the school they are not native English speakers. And so her challenge was finding something that she would be able to create assignments and send information and exchange ideas with students and their families. And there weren't enough translators, like real life translators around to help with that. And so when you have this immersive reader in these different tools, that helps because you can make those materials and resources available and accessible to all families and students. So immersive reader, and so this goes back to that very first remote learning kit, which I will drop the link in the chat. But some other things that we've done, and I'll share some other tools that you may be using, and I'll pause temporarily in a minute here to see if there are any questions. But as I mentioned, we did project-based learning and finding tools that enable you to do a lot. So having the Buncee board and being able to share one link with those schools in Argentina and Spain and connect, and those students and those teachers can then look at what we created, whether it's 10 or 20 or more students, and have all of those individual projects in one space, is really amazing that you can do that. And beyond that, now Buncee has the feature that you can comment. And so even though we're not in the same classroom space and we can't maybe always have those conversations, having the ability to put a comment or to exchange ideas using the comments feature is definitely something that helps us to connect even better. Other tools that we've used that Buncee is integrated with, Flipgrid is one. And so when we used Edmodo, we started to use Buncee for our project-based learning. My students also connected with Flipgrid and exchanged videos with the students in Argentina and Spain. And so it was awesome to get the notification that we had a new video posted on the grid on Flipgrid, and to be able to see the students that they had been talking with just in text through Edmodo, or just in the visuals and the presentations through Buncee. And then we also use Nearpod, which is another tool that if you're looking for something that really does offer a lot of ways to connect and collaborate and to engage students in learning, and is easy to get started for teachers, that is another one that I recommend, especially because they have the virtual reality trips. If you want to take students somewhere, instead of saying, imagine what it would be like if you went to whatever the place is, being able to actually take them on a virtual field trip, that is a great tool to use. And so Microsoft Teams, if you are a Microsoft school and you're using, or maybe starting to use Microsoft Teams, it does have immersive reader. In that presentation link that I will share for the remote learning, these 3 separate links are going to take you to some other piece of information with highlights and how to use the different features in Teams and immersive reader. Now, looking at this as a teacher, I could use this one slide as a lesson. I could give 3 goals for students. I could link a document or a screenshot. I could record a video, or just simply have 3 links to 3 other websites, whatever it was that I needed, but have it all confined into that one space, and it's accessible for students. So Microsoft Teams, and then the other new feature that is now, I believe, 3 weeks ago, if you use Microsoft Teams for your meetings, and you log into Buncee now, you can actually set up and schedule and launch Microsoft Teams meetings from Buncee. And so I know there are some teachers who have started to use that. So it's pretty exciting to have all of these tools kind of working together, especially as we're thinking, if you haven't already ended the school year, ending this school year, and then thinking ahead to the next school year. Other tools that I'll show you and talk about briefly here, Wakelet and Flipgrid. If you've used them, you may have seen the option in the logo for Buncee to be added into it. but it's easy to use either one of those to kind of deliver lessons, to connect with students, to do check-ins. Even with Flipgrid, I know that there are some teachers who have it for kind of like an inbox. If students want to ask a question, they can record a short video to ask a question to their teacher. And there are many, many ways to use it, which I'll share some of those here as well. But again, this is in the remote learning kit. And if you wanted to find out more ideas about how to create lessons, if you have a lot of resources, I know I have some friends who use Wakelet, for example, almost like a classroom website, and they put a post like, here's Monday, and put a link or a video or some text, and they can add to it, or they use it to have students share their projects or collaborate with other teachers. So a lot of different ways that you can use those and engage students and to connect, so they can respond to some of the different prompts that you would put on there and interact with each other in that space as well. And the same for Flipgrid. So connections, things that I would suggest: social media, Twitter, of course, if you have questions about Buncee or any of these tools. I mean, Flipgrid, Wakelet, Microsoft, there is so much support in all of those communities. You just need the hashtag or to follow those different groups. Even on Facebook, there are all of those communities too. And I've seen so many amazing ideas coming through every single day. Some from students that students are creating, especially at the end of the year here, for teachers looking for students for graduation and virtual events, trying to find ways that they can still connect with students and for students to connect with each other. There are a lot of ideas out there, and Buncee has created some templates that you can use as well. Of course, there's a blog, which I will share that with you as well, and I'll show you some of these other ideas. But I'm going to pause sharing temporarily and see if anybody has any questions. If you do, go ahead and drop them into the chat. And I will shift to this next screen here. I figured I'd take a temporary break and see if anything popped up. Okay, so next, I will go back and share again here. I'll tell you about talking about connecting and Flipgrid. If you have been using Flipgrid, then you already know about all of the amazing things that you can do with Flipgrid. But if you have heard about it and not yet started, it is another great tool that you can use for creating videos, for teaching lessons. There are a lot of tools that are out there if you wanted to record just a quick video, even using Zoom to do a screen recording. There are some others like Screencastify that teachers use. There's EduCreations. But with Flipgrid, you also now have the option, you can do a screen recording and record a video using Flipgrid. Now, one thing that I will show you, if you go to Flipgrid, they do have a blog where they shared some ideas for remote learning to kind of talk you through it, give you some ideas, even for family ideas, which I think is nice. When I looked at some of the different tools that I was using in my classroom, I tried to think about not just tools that would be great for my students and for what I was trying to teach them, but also what are some things that families could use. And I know for years, I said to my students when we'd play games like Kahoot or quizzes, if any of you have played those, I would say, you know, like you can play these in the summer, over the holidays, over a break, over a weekend with your family or with your friends if you're looking for something to do, because there are so many games and things available that it's just another option. And so using something like Flipgrid, I know many families and friends have been getting together and having meetings for Zoom or doing trivia or game nights or anything. But even with Flipgrid, you can have families engage together and just create a video and talk or share ideas or anything. But Flipgrid does offer a lot of different tips in there, and they have more than 12,000 ideas, which that's a lot, available in their Disco library. So if I log in, and I can tell you the ways that I've used this, I've used it for project-based learning. I have used it for, and make sure you sign up for Flipgrid Live at Home, because there is the pop-up. I have used it for project-based learning. I've used it for speaking assessments with my Spanish students. I've also used it for some reflections to ask my students for some feedback about the class. It's so important to me to find out, like, and I tell my students, just be honest. Like if something is not working for you, if it's an activity that we did and you think it didn't go that well, or there's something that maybe I could have done better, then I want to hear that from you. So I will sometimes create some different reflections for them. But just to give an example, if I click on my Spanish 1, so I have my grid, which is Spanish 1 for my class, and then I have different topics. And in each topic, I always create a prompt. So I had my family one, and then you can see all of my students who responded. I can give them video feedback. And what I chose to do for this also is to make it so when they log in, they don't see any of the other classmates' responses, because this was one of the first ones that they were doing. And I know some of my students are quite shy, like I said, about presenting in front of their classmates. And so I wanted to make sure they felt comfortable just talking about their family in Spanish and not worried about who would watch it or anything like that. Now that is one of the things that you can change in the settings, but I created a video, I shared it with them. And then if I were to just click on one of them, and I'll pause it here, then I could leave feedback, I could share it, I could do a lot of different things, give comments, and it goes back to the student. And now they're all hidden because, like I said, I didn't want all of the students to see each of their responses. Now, at other times, at other points, I have made it so that they have to listen to other responses and then respond to their classmates. So it does encourage the conversation. But initially, I want them to feel comfortable just recording their ideas and for me to give them some feedback. Now, if I go back to my Spanish 1, I can add different topics to it. I can create new prompts for it. It's very easy to do. I can always go back and change things. And you'll notice it does have the symbol. So Immersive Reader is also included in Flipgrid. And if I go back to all of my grids, I can always change a lot of things about them. I can choose on the actions. And if you have another teacher that you want to be kind of a co-pilot with you and have access to these as well, you can add a co-pilot. If you want to duplicate like everything, that whole class, and not have to recreate everything, you can duplicate it. You can set up notifications, which I get them through email, but it also has the integration with Teams, which is nice. So you have all these different tools that interact and make it really easy to kind of share and have students connecting with you and with each other in that space. Now, if I add a new grid, just to show as an example, so I'm just going to write in, I'll put PD, and depending on the type of grid, now for me with our school, it's Microsoft, so I always choose the school email. But if you're doing something for, say, professional development, or you're connecting with other schools and other educators, it's up to you with your educator if you want to do this with like a public grid. And then you can customize your flip code. I always try to make mine kind of unique so that my students remember it and use that across different platforms. So I'm going to keep it just like that and hit next. And then you have to add your domain. So I'm going to just put my school domain at the end. And it's ready. So now here are the ways that you can share it. So Microsoft Teams, you can get the embed code, the classroom, or if you use Remind, which is something that I do as well. So if I go to the grid, there is a topic that pops up, which you can make that inactive, but it's an easy way to get started. So if I want to add a new topic for students to get started talking, and I won't go through all parts of it and set it up, but I'll show you the options. You have your title. You can type in a prompt, which often I will type in some type of prompt for them. But you can also set the recording time, and it goes up to 10 minutes. And if you are recording a video or a screen recording, this is a nice option that is free for teachers to use to share videos and other lessons and things with their students, but also a great way to be able to connect and hear each other's voices, which is so important. Regardless of if we're in a physical classroom, it's nice to extend those conversations beyond our class period, but having something in place that makes it easy to transition from the physical space into the virtual space is nice as well. So if I pick, say, 2 minutes and 30 seconds, I choose video moderation so that the students, when they log into it, they don't see the other videos. By default, it's not on, but that's something, it's up to you if you wanted to make that the option where they don't see it until you go through and activate them. But then you can also add all of these different choices for media for students. And so these are some of the tools that maybe you're already using. As I mentioned, Buncee. Wonderopolis is one that I've been using with my STEAM course with my 8th graders, especially in talking about emerging technologies and trying to get them excited about like different ideas to pursue for their Genius Hour projects. But then there are some other ones that you may be using, like I mentioned, Nearpod, Wakelet, Kahoot. So if I were to click, say, Buncee, it'll ask me for a Buncee link. And so if I just go and grab one, which I created the other day for my class, and put that in there, and it's a lesson on commands and on some of the vocabulary for our chapter that we're working on Spanish 2. So now it's there, and that's the focus point. And I can scroll through. There are more options, and you can kind of work through those. If you have another link to share, if you want to title that, if you want to close off the ability for students to respond after a certain date. So here we have from today until never. But then different choices. So if students want to rearrange, if they want to go back and record it, often I will turn off the view count and the likes, just because that's something I started to do. And you can also turn off the ability for student to student reply. So it just depends on what your purpose is for creating it. But I forgot to create a title, so I'm going to put just PD for all of these. Okay, there we go. And I'll create the topic. And so now it's ready. So you could share that specific topic code, or whenever whoever's in that class would log in, they would be able to see that you have this new topic on Flipgrid, and they could record it. You can always go back and edit it, make any changes. You can move it up or down, whatever you want. So that's one thing that's nice. Connecting, also they have Grid Pals. So if you have ever done like Mystery Skype, or you're looking for pen pals or global collaborations, you can find where there are Flipgrid pals all around the world, and based on where you are, find a teacher that's kind of located near you, look at what subjects they teach, their grade level, and make a classroom connection like that. They also have the Disco Library, which if you're looking for some ideas, especially at the end of the year here, where we're trying to keep students engaged and even learning from home, the Wonderopolis, like I mentioned, there are a lot of things that have been created by teachers and shared to be used with Flipgrid. And so they come to be part of the Disco Library. So what you can do is you can scroll through and you can search based on audience, subject, or a specific topic. Even if anybody is interested in trying like digital breakouts, for example, Nearpod, if you're looking at coding and you have Tinker, any of these, if I just pick Wonderopolis, it has all of these different prompts. And so when we look at teaching and the time that we need to get started, this makes it really easy. So if I go, and I've seen this a lot lately, what is a Rube Goldberg machine? If I click on it, I can see the brief overview the teacher put in there, any other notes, what the audience is, and then all I have to do is choose which grid, meaning which of my classes to add it to. And so if I click that and hit add, then it's added almost until you go through and check everything to your class. And so now when my students would log in the next time, they would see that I had this new topic, and it didn't take me any time at all other than to proof over and see and make sure it was relevant and okay for the grade level and for the content that I'm teaching. So students could then share ideas, ask questions, give feedback to one another if you enable that. But it is a nice way to be able to connect students with each other. But I will tell you, the one thing that I have loved is having my students tell me about what they're learning when they're reading these articles about artificial intelligence and emerging technologies and whatever it is that they're exploring, and then being able to hear them talk and share their ideas and whatever it is that they think they're going to create, but then being able to talk back to them and give them some feedback and have those conversations. And it's definitely not a full replacement, of course, for being in the classroom with them. But during this time where we've been out of our classrooms for so long, it is nice to have this space where we can connect. So if you're not using Flipgrid, I definitely recommend checking it out, as well as Buncee, because it's really easy if you created something in Buncee to then add something into Flipgrid. Wakelet, if you've ever heard of it or you've maybe seen it, it's also free. Kind of similar to Padlet a little bit, where you curate a lot of different materials and resources into a space. But if I were to say, let me find one to grab. Okay, STEAM articles, I'll pick this one. So I have a collection, and in this collection, and there is a Chrome extension. So if you can see on my screen, there is a W where if you're reading an article, you can then click on that W and it will open up your Wakelet and you can save it into your Wakelet collection. So if I edit the collection it will show you all of the different articles or resources or videos, whatever I've been accumulating on this topic, which is my collection, for as long as I've had it. So I can always go back. I can even change the layout. That is currently in grid view, but I could do mood board, so it moves it across. I'm gonna put it back. But the thing about this is if you're looking for one tool that enables you to connect with students, to share resources, for them to comment, and to have a lot of exchanges of information, to teach a lesson. I even have a good friend, Laura Steinbrink, who used Wakelet to create a scavenger hunt. So lots of possibilities. We're teachers, we're creative. But the things that you can add to it just by clicking a URL. So if you want to teach a lesson, your collection becomes the title or topic of your lesson. And then you can add in text. You can find a YouTube video or share the link that you have. Maybe if you're looking to add in different tweets related to the topic, if you have an image, a PDF, all of these options. But the other feature too that's nice about Wakelet is that you can record a Flipgrid short video. So it will open it up, and there I am, and you can record up to 10 minutes and save that in there. So again, not necessarily that you need all of these other screen recording tools or anything that are out there. I mean, there are so many options, but when you can have one like Buncee that you can record the video in, or use Flipgrid and add other components like a Nearpod lesson or the Wonderopolis, for example, or your own materials that you've created, and even using Wakelet. And so those with all of the Microsoft Teams and Google Classroom. And then I will show you the Buncee lesson that I did the other day. I used the template. And the nice thing about Buncee is that, and with all of these tools, is that you have resources already available. And so if I scroll through this, the background was there. I just added in different characters. I added in the content. I'm trying to teach the students these irregular 2 commands, and there's a mnemonic that goes with it. But a part of this is also I created my virtual classroom, and you may have seen this on Facebook or on Twitter. Teachers are creating their virtual classrooms using Bitmoji or Google Slides or Buncee, like I did in this case. And there are 2 teachers, the Merrills, who wrote the book, The Interactive Classroom, who created a template. And so I use this one as a template to set up for my classroom, but for my students to basically come into my classroom, which is my virtual classroom, and any of these that are over here are the tools that we use the most often. They can simply click on whatever the link is, and it will take them to that site. So again, it's one space where everybody can kind of connect. And so at the end of the school year now, having this time where I can share this with them in case, like in August when we come back to school, we are not in our classroom. I'm the only Spanish teacher, and so if they have me and they're continuing, they will have me next year, so it's ongoing. So trying to now think forward to what are some things that I definitely want to make sure that I keep when we are back into our classroom space in the fall. Hopefully that happens. And so the last thing that I will share, ideas. So any of these tools, Flipgrid, Wakelet, Microsoft, Buncee, they all have blogs, different ideas, always having updates that you can use. And getting started with creating is very easy to do as well. There is the remote learning site, so I will drop that link into the chat. But the last thing that I wanted to show you, and then I'll leave 5 minutes for questions, and hopefully the technology works, is contact information. Feel free to reach out on Twitter. Send me an email. It's rdene915@gmail. If I don't know the answer, which could happen, I will be happy to connect you with somebody or share ideas with you or find somebody that can, point you in the right direction, but I'm glad to help. But if I go back to the Buncee dashboard, Ideas Lab is where you might want to start if you're looking for some different ideas for even the end of the year for graduation, for having students share what they've been working on, connecting with a group journal. That's a neat activity that just started. Lots of things that you can get started with without having to create from scratch. But I will tell you, it is really fun to create with Buncee from scratch because of all of the choices that are available, but you don't have to. Just like with Flipgrid, with the Disco Library, there are things that are already available that you can get that quick start with. And so having a space where you can connect with the students and exchange ideas and hear each other's voices and even see each other, even if it's not a synchronous kind of meeting, like with those videos, it makes a huge difference. And I know in the last couple of days, asking my students for some feedback, just for my own learning, the biggest things that they have said is having the meetings with Zoom, having the videos and things to connect where they could hear my voice, or that they could talk and share ideas and hear each other's voices as well, has made a difference for them, feeling like they're more connected and part of some type of normal classroom school experience, even though it's not the normal classroom school experience right now. So with that being said, this time goes so quickly, and I know it's a lot of information, but the biggest takeaways is just start with one thing, one tool. What is the most important thing that you do? For me, it's finding a way to connect with students, the relationships, having something where they know that they can go to get information, they can get help, they can ask questions, whatever it is that they need. And so lots of tools out there. And the best is to find something that really does enable you and the students to explore and to create new things, but also that will work with families as well. And so I think that you'll find with a lot of these tools, especially now, there are resources available to make sure that students and families are supported and feel connected to school and to you as the teacher. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing so I can drop some of these links into the chat. And thank you. Oh, I love the hola, and I like the Spanish and the French. And yes, Buncee, I recommend, and I do use a lot of tools, and I spend a lot of time in front of the computer because I really want to make it easier for everybody else. So if I can tell you really quickly, like a lot of times if you say, I want to do this, this, and this, ideas will pop into my head of a tool that I think like that's the one that you want to go with. And if I can do that and save you time and frustration, then that is what I'm all about. So even though presentation is ending and the hour is almost done, definitely reach out to me if you do have questions. I would love to share ideas. I'm going to drop a couple links into the chat. So you have the first one will take you to the remote learning. Yes, the recording will be available. It will take you to the remote learning site with Buncee where you can access. Buncee does have webinars every day, Monday through Friday at 12 and 3 p.m. Eastern. I do my own Buncee webinar that I will drop the link in here. I made it easy to remember for myself. But I started to do it for teachers in my school district and local schools. As I said, we don't have a tech coach. And so on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, I do my own Buncee weekly webinar. I'm going to actually be adding another one on during the week just within the summer here. So happy to answer questions. And I thank you all for joining in. I'll still be here for a little bit. If you have questions to ask or want to share any ideas, you can feel free to drop those in there. And I'm trying to see if I have anything else I can share with you. For examples, I could share my virtual classroom that I created because that's kind of fun. But there is a template out there as well that you can check out if you want to make your own. It was from the Merrills. If you follow them on Twitter, or if you send me a message on Twitter and you want to know what that template is, then I'd be happy to share that with you as well. But I will drop in my virtual classroom. And you can make copies of them, which is nice. So if you are working with another teacher and you want to kind of divide it up, it's not the same as if you do, like say Google. The hack is you make it so somebody else can copy it, like when you do with a Google document or presentation, then they could add to it and then share it back to you so that it's copyable and you kind of work together. So yay, Pittsburgh too. Okay, so I am going to stop recording. Thank you all for joining. I hope you have a great rest of your day. If you have questions, rdene915 on Twitter or at Gmail. And I also I've been working on a blog that'll come out with some ideas for Buncee too. And they did have a blog come out yesterday with 10 ideas of creating with Buncee for the summer. And so same thing with Flipgrid. Flipgrid has some events coming up. Wakelet has some events next week, doing some webinars and presentations. So lots of great things happening. And definitely with Learning Revolution, on Friday, I have a session I'm doing, changing it up a little bit with artificial intelligence. So thank you for joining in.